She wanted the deed to the lake house. She set it in front of my granddaughter. I did not raise my voice. Before I tell you what happened next, you need to understand the room we were sitting in. It was the back porch of the lake house my late wife Helen and I built nearly 4 decades ago. Every board carried a memory: family birthdays, summer mornings, quiet evenings by the water, even the final gathering after Helen's funeral. That porch had witnessed my entire adult life. It was early September of 2025. I had made breakfast for everyone, as I always did. Blueberry pancakes, bacon, fresh orange juice. My 9-year-old granddaughter Hattie sat beside me, happily talking about a school project while powdered sugar covered her chin. Across from us sat my son Marcus and his wife Bryn. Marcus barely looked up from his phone. Bryn kept studying the house with the same calculating expression she'd worn for years. I'm Theodore, though most people call me Theo. I'm 68 years old. I spent most of my life building a marine engineering company from almost nothing. By the time I retired, the business was successful enough that I never had to worry about money again. That matters because Bryn knew exactly what I owned, and she wanted it. When Hattie finished her breakfast, I asked her to take her sketchbook down to the dock and draw a heron she'd been watching all morning. The moment the screen door closed behind her, Bryn opened a folder. Not a casual conversation folder, a prepared folder, the kind someone brings when they've already decided how things are supposed to end. She explained that maintaining the lake house was becoming difficult for me. She said Marcus and she could take over the responsibility. Then she slid a quitclaim deed across the table. Already prepared, already waiting for my signature. I looked at my son. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Whose names are on it?" I asked. "Both of ours," Bryn replied without hesitation. The answer told me everything. You see, this wasn't really about helping me. This was about ownership, about control, about getting their hands on the one thing Helen and I had built together. As I stared at that paperwork, memories started rushing back. I remembered Marcus as a child. I remembered every sacrifice Helen and I made for him. The tuition payments, the first car, the law school bills, the down payment we gifted him when he bought his first home. I never kept score because parents aren't supposed to. You help your children because you love them. But sitting there that morning, I realized something painful. Love had slowly turned into expectation, and expectation had turned into entitlement. The warning signs had been there for years. Even before Helen passed away, after her death, Bryn started asking questions about assets, property, and inheritance, far sooner than any decent person should have. I ignored it. I convinced myself I was protecting family harmony. I told myself Helen would have wanted peace. Looking back now, I wasn't keeping peace. I was avoiding conflict, and sometimes avoiding conflict only gives selfish people more room to grow. I pushed the deed back across the table. I'm not signing that. The smile disappeared from Bryn's face, and for the first time that morning, the real conversation began. The smile disappeared from Bryn's face. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Then she leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. "Theo," she said, "you're not being reasonable." I almost laughed. Reasonable. That word always seems to appear when someone isn't getting what they want. "This house isn't a business asset," I said quietly. "It's my home." Bryn immediately launched into a speech about responsibility, maintenance costs, long-term planning, and family security. Every sentence sounded rehearsed. Every argument sounded prepared, as if she and Marcus had already discussed exactly how this conversation would go. The only problem was they had assumed I would say yes. When I didn't, frustration began creeping into her voice. Marcus still sat there staring at the table. I kept waiting for him to speak, to say something, anything. But he remained silent. That silence hurt more than I wanted to admit, because fathers spend years believing their sons will become the men they raised. Sometimes life proves otherwise. Bryn finally pushed the paperwork closer. "You're thinking emotionally." "Of course I am," I replied. "My wife died here. My granddaughter learned to swim here. Why wouldn't I think emotionally?" She rolled her eyes. Actually rolled her eyes. At that moment, I realized she wasn't trying to persuade me anymore. She was trying to pressure me. And pressure only works when the other person is afraid. I wasn't afraid. I was disappointed. There's a difference. Then something shifted. The carefully controlled mask she had worn all morning started cracking. Her voice sharpened. Her patience disappeared. She accused me of being selfish. She accused me of making life harder for Marcus and Hattie. She even implied I was hoarding assets that should eventually belong to them. That was the moment I understood exactly what this had always been about. Not concern, not family, ownership. I pushed the folder back toward her. No. One word. Firm. Final. The reaction was immediate. Bryn stood up so suddenly her chair scraped across the porch floor. "What is wrong with you?" she snapped. I remained seated. Nothing angers a controlling person more than calm resistance. She moved around the table. For a second I thought she was simply trying to intimidate me. Then it happened. A sharp sting exploded across my face. The force knocked my hearing aid loose. It bounced across the porch boards. The world seemed to freeze. I could hear the distant water, the wind moving through the trees, my own heartbeat. Everything except the one thing I wanted to hear. My son's voice. Marcus had seen it. He had watched his wife strike his father. Surely now he would speak. Surely now he would step in. Instead, he looked at me and said words I'll never forget. "Dad, why do you always make everything harder than it needs to be?" That was it. Not anger at her. Not concern for me. Not shock. Just blame. Directed at the wrong person. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you spent your life protecting, subscribe to this channel. Some stories aren't about revenge. They're about the moment you finally see people clearly. I slowly picked up my hearing aid, put it back in, adjusted it. Then I looked at both of them. My voice stayed calm. "Pack your things." Bryn blinked. "What?" "You heard me. Theo, don't be ridiculous. Pack your things." Marcus finally stood. "Come on, Dad." "No." I pointed toward the stairs. "You're leaving today." Neither of them expected that answer. People who rely on your generosity often assume it has no limits. They never imagine what happens when those limits are finally reached. While they argued, I walked outside, down to the dock. Hattie was still drawing, completely unaware that her family had just changed forever. She looked up and smiled. Pop, look, I got the heron." For a moment my heart broke, because children always end up standing closest to the damage adults create. I sat beside her. "That's beautiful, sweetheart." She studied my face. "Are you okay?" I forced a smile. "I will be." After a few minutes, I stepped away and made 2 phone calls. The first was to my attorney, a woman who had handled my affairs for decades. When I explained what happened, she became very quiet. Then she said something that changed everything. "Don't make any decisions alone today. I'm coming over." The second call was to my financial advisor, and unlike my first call, this one wasn't about advice. It was about action. Because as I stood at the end of that dock looking back at the house Helen and I built together, I realized something. For years I had been supporting a life that no longer respected me. That support was about to end. And before the sun set that evening, the first pieces would already be moving into place. And before the sun set that evening, the first pieces would already be moving into place. Over the following weeks, everything changed. The accounts Marcus had access to were removed. The financial arrangements I'd quietly maintained for years came to an end. Legal notices were filed. Ownership interests were reclaimed. And the trust I had established after Helen's passing was rewritten so that my granddaughter, not my son, would be protected in the future. None of it happened out of anger. That surprises people. The truth is, anger fades, clarity lasts. For the first time in years, I stopped asking what everyone else needed from me and started asking what was right. A few weeks later, Marcus came to see me alone. He looked exhausted, older, like someone finally carrying the weight of choices he'd spent years avoiding. He apologized. Not perfectly, not completely, but honestly. And for the first time, he admitted something I never expected to hear. He said he had been afraid to stand up to his wife. That confession didn't erase what happened. Some wounds don't close that quickly, but it opened a door, a small one, and sometimes that's enough to begin. If you've ever had to choose between keeping peace and keeping your self-respect, subscribe. Stories like this remind us that some boundaries are worth defending, no matter how painful the cost. Today, the lake house is still mine. More importantly, It remains a place where my granddaughter feels safe. She visits regularly now. We make blueberry pancakes. We sit on the porch. We watch the herons along the water. And every time she walks through that door, I'm reminded why I stood my ground. Because this story was never really about property. It was about dignity. It was about learning that love isn't measured by how much you give away. It's measured by whether the people receiving it value the sacrifice. And if they don't, you stop handing them the keys. You keep building. You keep protecting what matters. And you remember that it's never too late to reclaim your own front porch. The house remains. The memories remain. And on quiet Sunday mornings, with Hattie laughing across the table, I know one thing for certain. I finally chose the right thing to protect,